Hey, what's up, everybody? I have finally finished editing an amazing discussion from March 25th with an independent investigator slash journalist named Allison McDowell. Allison is brilliant, and when you watch the discussion, it's clear that I am very new to the interview process. Nonetheless, as I comb through it all this time later, I realize that it's something that's more than worth posting because the work is ongoing and I find her truly inspirational. I do my best to include timestamps in here at the appropriate places, but I'm new to all this, and of course, any appropriate links. And a link to her channel will be directly below this, the description. So yeah, without further ado, here's the interview from March 25th. It runs long, but I think it's a good discussion on her part. She's really brilliant. Check it out. And also, just a little FYI for anybody watching, should I post this? I live, and I'll tell Allison this too, I feel the need to for some reason, as if people give a crap, but still, I live in like constant chronic pain, which is, nobody's problem. But I'm just also, in addition to that, sitting in probably the least ergonomic, most uncomfortable chair, period, end of story, like in the history of chairs. So I shift and move a lot. This chair was not designed for sitting for more than 5 minutes, and certainly not sitting at a computer, and certainly not, all right, here we go. Hello there.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. I can hear you perfectly. Can you
Good.
hear me all right?
Let me close the door to my closet.
All right.
Sorry, I lost the link to the Zoom. I'm always like, I have this Proton mail. It's not really searchable. Like Google's really searchable. I'm like, where did I put it?
No, no problem at all. No problem at all. I'm just grateful for you taking the time out of what I imagine is, a busy schedule to chat with me. Honestly, I wanted to start this off by saying I was going to make a list of questions, but I decided not to go that route because I know what I want to chat with you about. Um, when my friend, he actually is in a Zoom meeting about purchasing land with friends and sustainable development and all that, like trying to find ways to get out of the city right now. And then
Yeah.
he realized he had that meeting, so he couldn't join in. But I think there's some things he wanted me to ask you, just your thoughts on. But he forwarded me your videos, and for 2 weeks I didn't watch them. I didn't notice they were in my text, and he kept saying, "Did you check that out? Did you check out Allison McDowell?" And I told him yes because I thought I had, and then I realized I didn't. And I watched two of your videos. The one with, is it Shai from Israel? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Um,
The long one or the shorter one?
that was about 59 minutes, I think.
It was like not the 4 hour one.
No, but I want to go back and watch that one. And I started to
Yeah.
watch also. I just went to your channel after that and started watching the videos. But the way you are able to make palatable what is going on in terms of the transition into a new transaction system, I was just
Yeah.
blown away by that. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, I need to connect with you just because, like you said, I think, or you intimated, it's really important that we all be talking to each other and that we reach out to each other during this time.
Yeah.
To
Because
bounce,
it's people.
yeah,
It's regular people. That's the
yeah,
thing. Like
that are doing
it's
this.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
anyway,
and that can resist it. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I mean, now more people know my stuff, but it's not somebody who's like some big personality that's going to do the stuff. It's actually just regular people.
right, right. And so let's just start there. Can you talk about what I think it's social impact investing? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Hmm.
Okay. Um, can you talk a little bit about what that is? And I know it might be rehashing old stuff for you, but for anybody new who might watch, family members of mine,
Yeah.
how you even got into this in the first place, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So essentially what I think I have been bringing to the conversation around this shift when the fourth industrial revolution, the great reset, transhumanist agenda, whatever, is that there's a financial apparatus that goes with it.
Right.
So there's a financial apparatus that then becomes embedded in the built environment. And I was just a parent. Yeah, I mean, not just, I'm a parent and I work half time. And so I was tracking stuff in the public schools in Philadelphia. I don't know how things are in Austin, but actually it's interesting because the reason I got in was because the Dell Foundation came and was messing with our schools.
Yeah, and they're located.
There's the Austin connection, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't know at the time. I didn't really for me. They closed, the Boston Consulting Group closed a bunch of schools, and then I was like, and then after they created all of this havoc, they wanted to then, that was in the spring and in the summer, restructure and start grading the schools and put them on these rubrics, and then also set up things where you could apply to go to, have one application to go to, charter school, public school, parochial school, private school, and Penn was going to run it. And it was just crazy. And I'm like, one, you don't explode something and then rush in and then try to, well, then you do. I mean, I was naive at the time.
Right,
I was just like, well, this makes no sense. It clearly, as I understand, things get broken on purpose, and it's this disruption, and then they move their agenda. And so I organized a bunch of parents to show up, because this was in July, and they don't really, if you're planning a meeting in the summer, you're not expecting parents to show up. It was supposed to be 6 sequential meetings to talk about this new school report card and this new universal enrollment system. And so the first meeting, we all, I got 40 or 50 people, which is a lot for a summer meeting, to show up. And we all had little placards saying this isn't fair, this isn't right. Even so, if we weren't heard, we could just be and then it totally disrupted, because it was no offense, but a youngish consultant, they figured this was going to be some easy gig. They just, have 5 or 6 people check the box that they did the meeting.
Move on. Yeah. And
then we'd had this big pushback. And so then the next day was supposed to be one of the other 6 meetings. And when people showed up to that meeting, there was a sign on the door saying, "It has been postponed." Mm-hmm. And then shortly thereafter, we've decided to have focus groups instead. Invitation only. Yeah. So that was my
so access removed.
So that was sort of my yeah, exactly. And so at the time I was still sort of a a naive liberal, I'm professional, class, have a graduate degree, things worked, right? The system always worked for me. I worked well in the system. I was the product of the system. And so it never really occurred to me more than just cursorily to understand how messed up the whole thing was. You just scratch a little bit below the surface and it's
right there. Yeah.
It's right there. Yeah. So I was working in schools, and then increasingly it was about data analytics. So these schools were closed based on test scores. So they would use very narrow curriculum, more and more technology. The kids would get sick of the technology. They'd do worse on the test, and they justify closing the schools or turning them over to private interest because of the test scores. And then that would give them more technology. And it was this bad cycle. So I organized around opt out for a while. And then, when in 2015, the new federal legislation around education, K-12 education, passed, called the Every Student Succeeds Act. So it used to be No Child Left Behind, NCLB, and then it was ESS-ESSA. And in that legislation was something that enabled pay for success finance, which was essentially creating these investment markets that would be in data analytics in schools. And then in addition to that, under the Obama administration, student data privacy in schools, it's called the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, FERPA. And it's kind of like HIPAA for health records. There was FERPA in schools and HIPAA in medical or clinical settings. Well, they shredded FERPA. And so it was still there was a sense of it there, but essentially any entity acting in the capacity of the school district, if it was services were outsourced, could have access to data. And that would feed these impact markets. And so what we're going to see coming as, and I did not foresee pandemic in any of this, right? But there was the big push around community schools. They were talking about community schools, but it's all fake. It's fake community. Yeah. And so they're going to push telehealth and telemedicine and teletherapy services into the schools. And if they're in the schools, the kids' data isn't protected.
Right.
So they can start pushing out therapeutics, digital, like they can hijack these kids. And we've seen even in like DC, they're talking about kids as young as 11, like being legally now able to consent to medical treatment in schools.
Yeah, it's wild.
Which is, they're like 11, right?
Yeah, it's beyond.
And there's like the medical complex, not just the medical complex, but the impact investors who are being set up to improve these kids in a school setting. So that was sort of my entry point into understanding this idea of predatory finance, and the way in which philanthropy, often of which is connected to corporate interests, either directly or secondarily, seed these markets, because the markets for the impact investing would never, if it were theoretically a free market, like they would never work. Right. And so the money is poured in through these entities, like through the Giving Pledge and these different things, to create an environment, both policy wise and to create proofs of concept and to sort of strong arm people into accepting this process.
Well, they bottleneck they bottleneck people into it, kind of. There's no other option.
So I did the school stuff for a long time, and the idea of pay for success is that there's this cost offset. So it's essentially creating a profit center out of a social problem.
Okay. So,
and Philadelphia is a large city. We're predominantly Black city, poor city.
Delve into that a little bit if you can.
So social problems like housing insecurity, food insecurity, unemployment, the judicial system, family protect, whatever. They're not really protective services, but like the family court system, addiction, all of these things become like, oh, these are social problems that we can fix. And if we can fix them, like air quotes, in data, then we can justify saving the government money. And then we just take a little bit of that as our profit for investment. And so it sounds beautiful. Like this is like riding on like the tailwind of the Great Reset, is like stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah.
Like now we've realized we did this capitalism is a problem. So now we're going to like do the good kind, which is that we make money on social problems.
Right.
But what I keep pointing out is if you actually find a way to make money on it, you're only going to grow the
you're going to grow the problem. It's going to metastasize.
It'll be managed. You might ameliorate it, but so like we're a center of the heroin epidemic. Like we have like extreme wealth inequality. We have a huge issue around housing access. Like there's a 10-year wait list on our affordable housing. Wow. All the government institutions are crooked. Yep. And yet people, like the poor people, are being put through their paces through the nonprofit systems. And ultimately this will be tied into these investment markets where people are almost like tracked like characters in, like Logan's Run or a video game. Like they sort of set you loose and they say, these are appropriate behaviors for you. We've set aside a self-improvement plan, whether that is addressing your addiction issues or your depression or your obesity or what have you. And now we can track you with, our smart shirts and our, smart pill bottles and our, smart retinal scans on the doorbell. And like, we can track you in this game. And that the nature of this game and this infrastructure was coming out of Wharton, which the whole impact investing scene actually emerged out of the University of Pennsylvania, which is based here. And Judith Rodin, who was the former president of Penn, became the head of the Rockefeller Foundation. And she like spearheaded the creation of this global market, because it's a global market. And essentially your misery becomes packaged as debt that can then be traded on global markets. So this is not that your debt is necessarily invested in by your city or your state, but literally once you're packaged as debt, that you could be invested in by the Vatican, SoftBank, UBS Bank. It's a global thing. So that's why this health event that's happened tied to the Sustainable Development Goals, like it's a full-on global reset, because they need cross-border investment options.
Yeah. And it also,
I don't know, that's kind of a lot.
It's provided the perfect opportunity for them to do all the things you were talking about. And there were several things that really kind of brought it home for me listening to you. One was when you were talking about Pokemon Go, and I'll tell it like, and how was connected to the CIA, and how education and lifelong learning, as good as that sounds, right? Lifelong learning. Yeah. Well, but what it will ultimately be is us chasing these skill sets for tokens
Yeah.
to basically just like, you know, rats on a wheel or whatever is kind of what I picture, especially the welfare state, you know, just perpetuating that, relieving the misery just enough so that people keep coming back for more. As far as the incentives, I think of it like this when I try to break it down for people, and just tell me your thoughts on this. I used to work with youth, and interestingly, and I won't say where, interestingly, the University of Pennsylvania ran a research project for children suffering from addiction using a video game. And I just last night, watching one of your videos, started to connect the dots, and I was like, good grief, that's part of it. I bet if I look into the funding and all of it, that's part of it. But anyway, that aside, I think the system looks at us with the incentives, and you know, attaching us to the blockchain, and, you know, getting scores, and, you know, that limiting you as to what you can do as children in a program, you know. So I used to work in a residential program, and we would give children incentives for certain types of behaviors, to reinforce certain types of behaviors, right?
Total, it's operant conditioning, all of it.
And all of that, all this is that on a grand scale, using amazing technology. And I was skeptical of the blockchain from the beginning, but I could never quite articulate why. And a friend of mine, well, a mutual friend, sort of, more like a friend of a friend, he's a really good guy, but he had been pushing Wise Token. He wanted us to get involved in Wise Token, loves crypto. And I had so many thoughts and criticisms and reservations about it, but you know, I'm not smart enough when it comes to understanding crypto and blockchain to really articulate those. All I knew is I kept saying, when we would have Zoom meetings, I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. You're telling me this is decentralized. How? There's somebody managing it. What are they doing with that? And inside of these little blocks where these smart contracts go, what are in those contracts? You know what I'm saying? How do I, once that information is cemented there, how are you telling me that it's safe? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just.
Or even the information could get in there and it could be wrong.
Right.
I mean, and then later, I mean, they say, oh, well, we'll correct it down the line. We'll say that there was a correction, but you know, I have a friend who's a professor in the Bay Area, and she was at a blockchain conference, and they were talking, because it's supply chain tracking. Like, literally, it's turning people into supply. Like, and she said, well, you might be able to do this for lettuce heads. Like, they're saying, like, oh, well, you'll know which one is contaminated, or which one fell off the truck, or which one, you know, like which one is damaged. And so you'll have the best, you know, you'll have, but she's like, then you don't apply that to children. You know, you don't say, oh, this child was born and the mother had addiction issues, or this child was abused, and then that's in their permanent record and they never get out. Like you might, I mean, I have issues with blockchain because I don't think from an environmental standpoint, it's a sustainable model. Like, nobody can show me the energy and the water and the data storage costs that they have any clue how to scale this thing in a way that isn't going to kill the planet. So
right. And I would love for you to speak to that at some point if you could too, because
yeah, but yeah, she's like, don't do that to kids. Like, even if you could do it, you don't do it. You don't blockchain people. I mean, it's blockchain, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's to me seems like where we're going. And here was the connection in my mind that I made in my head. I was like, all right, just running myself through the critical thinking process about it, asking the who, what, when, where, how, you know. I'm like, they're creating these cryptocurrencies, and what gives it the value? And then I started wondering to myself, like, what if what gives it value is me somehow? You know what I'm saying? Like, in other words, something backs a currency. Right now, we have fiat currency, but what sort of backs it is that we force the world to use our dollar to make purchases for oil and such, primarily, and other things too. And it's a system of force, like Catherine Austin Fitts says, it's a system of brute force that we use to keep it in place. But once they transition out of that, they have a plan for how they're going to use this blockchain. And I began to wonder, like, what would back that to give it value? And besides, like, food and water, possibly, and this is just me thinking out loud, like I said, I know next to nothing about this stuff, but it seemed to me that people people would be what gives it value. And that would depend on how valuable you were to them. So, you know, my social credit
it could
score,
change
yeah,
like hour to hour if it, depending on your compliance.
exactly. Yeah. So if you could speak a little bit to that, I know it's a lot to unpack too. I mean, I was really moved by the discussion you had with Shai. I had no idea about the 10 digital nations. If you could speak to that and sort of like, you know, what stage you think they're in, and what kind of time they're going to have transitioning that to a place like the United States. They're already doing it, I know, but where are we in the
Yeah.
development of it? Because like you said, there are lots of moving parts and pieces, especially when you
Right.
get down the line, like to really where it evolves into us being batteries powering our digital selves, which is totally feasible.
Right.
Seems like,
The
you know,
Matrix. Yeah, I
yeah.
know.
See, well, and also when you really look at like the steps we've taken, you begin to realize like that's not so wild. That's actually like seems like that's where they're bringing us. You know what I mean? Like it begins to seem very real. And every step along the way, they've tried to humanize it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like
And gamify it. Make it fun.
make it fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So if you could talk a little bit about the digital nations and where we are in the process here, um, as best as you can.
Well, so I will say too about the backing.
Mhm.
So there was an organization that was really prominent in the education space for a while, and their website has been taken down, but it's still in the Wayback Machine. But it's called Global Education Futures Forum,
Okay.
and it was spearheaded by a gentleman. His name is Pavel Luksha, and he's out of Skolkovo, which is sort of like the Silicon Valley of Russia, like management school. And his background is mining. So this is a lot about mining and extraction. And these people were connected. They had a global network that included like people from Stanford and Harvard. And, you know, there were people in Argentina and people in South Korea. Like it was a full-on global network. In the United States, the point person, his name was Tom Vander Ark, who was one of the early program officers for the Gates Foundation. And he created the first sort of state level cyber virtual school outside of Seattle.
Interesting.
And his background was also in mining, Colorado School of Mines.
Yeah.
So it's very mining intensive process. And so they had a number of infographics. And so they would do like strategic foresight documents. And, you know, I'm not in the corporate space, but all these big companies have like 20, 30, 50-year plans out. And
Absolutely,
they do the signals intelligence of what's happening in the world, and they make projections, and then they have
backup plans for those
plans.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there are these documents that were with Global Education Futures Forum, and their agenda is still online. You can find it up to 2035 for the future of education. Now, if you understand that both healthcare and I think healthcare, education, and housing are the ways in which they will control your mind and body.
Gotcha.
Like in this internet of bodies. So the backdrop to this is the fourth industrial revolution, the advent of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, sensor networks, synthetic biology, the internet of bodies, all of that. So that's like automation, dispossession of people. It's like the last frontier is your cells, right? Like CRISPR level bioengineering that's the manifest destiny of we're getting down to your DNA. And so one of the documents, actually, it was a timeline. It has incredible amount of detail. People are like, how are you so smart? And I'm like, mostly I just read what they say. And
yeah.
And I believe them because they have all the money and power, like, which is not to say that they're going to accomplish it, but like, you don't dismiss it when the people with all the money and power say stuff. You pay attention. Absolutely. So one of the little items that I pull out often in my thing, it talked about a people-naire. So it was like a billionaire or millionaire, but probably a billionaire that had fortunes made up of people. Portfolios of human capital. It specifically said there were two separate sections. One was about human capital investing, and one was specifically a people-naire. And they would have things like prenatal university, crazy stuff. And yeah, you would just walk it through. So like they're clearly already anticipating that. And then, the other piece of this is that it is the way they securitize people as debt. It's somewhat abstracted, right? Like if you understand what happened with the housing market, they took physical buildings and then framed them as debt securities,
Right.
and then bundled them and sliced and diced them and then traded them.
Right.
So it was many times removed from the physical asset. Like it was connected, but it became abstracted over time. The more it was traded, it was abstracted. And so the idea that's coming is that with automation, we're sort of moving into a post-human world.
Right.
Like we're moving into a world where like these couple hundred billionaires really kind of just want to run it with their robots and their managerial class. And they just like, we're kind of useless at this point if they can get the machines to do this stuff.
Right.
Now, I'm not totally convinced that and I'm in no way saying this is some gleaming, fancy, seamless future that's just going to function well. It's going to be lurching, broken, brutal, and horrible. Right. But if they take all of the other options away, then we're just going to be shoved into the hulking, brutal, horrible, I live in Philadelphia. None of this stuff works seamlessly. I keep hoping something goes wrong, they stick an orange cone on it, like the awareness cone. Like I'm kind of hoping the awareness cone is the thing. It's not going to actually happen, but they're going to try to shove this thing at us. And so what do you do with these excess people? Well, first you need to this spatial web, this sensor network in which we are interacting with this cyber physical world, like the world in the room that you live in, the outside world has these sensors that have contracts.
1 second. Just 1 second, because what you're about to say is so important. And I think a lot of people don't know about the Internet of Things or what it is. And you describe it as the Internet of Bodies. I think that you're using that term instead of Internet of Things, right? Am I correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of
because
both.
I think it's better. It's a better description.
There's actually even the Internet of Bio Nano Things, which is even scary. Yeah. People should look that up. It's really great. It'll blow your mind.
So if you could talk a little bit, or just integrate into that to help people understand just how much of that infrastructure is already in place, because I think that people are unaware of the fact that even if you don't live in a quote smart city, those sensors, those things are going. I mean, definitely here in Austin, it's a tech hub. Those things are going up all around us, and they're in products.
Do you have the small cell? I mean, are you seeing all the small cell stuff going in, or just the big towers?
Both. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. They're rolling it out. So,
I mean, it's interesting because I'm in Philadelphia, so we're also a smart city. We're the home of Comcast. So it's sort of like, welcome to the 21st century, where your global open air digital prison is run by your cable company, or your phone company. Like that's sort of how it feels. Like, who thought that the phone company and the cable companies were going to run the digital jail?
That's just it. That's why I think that's part of the reason that it's easy to miss. So sorry, I didn't mean to stop you in your flow there, but I want people to understand what a smart city is, because it's going to be pitched to them, of course, for all the benefits, and there's going to be a lot of bells and whistles and conveniences, and I want people to be able to see past that for what it truly is, and so if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, so if you imagine you're a crazy sociopathic billionaire running the world, and you want to sort of manage, you need to manage the people to build this, this internet, this sensor network. So at the base level, your phone is a sensor. Okay, like right now, most people have smartphones, and that is a sensor. And when you have it on you, that's sort of like the Internet of Bodies. They kind of can know where you are in a given moment, predict based on your past behavior where you're likely to be next, or see unusual patterns in your behavior. Increasingly, I mean, there's smart things in. I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn on. Let me just see if I can turn these. I really suck at this. Sorry.
Don't believe me.
Okay.
Don't worry.
I don't know how to turn these things, these alerts on. Anyway, so maybe you can edit that part out. But so, oh my gosh, I don't even stop it.
I knew that was
See,
going to
it's the
happen.
internet
I knew that
thing.
was going to happen to me, so I actually turned off. I
I
exited out of
thought
the
like, well,
mail and
normally I
everything
had it like
beforehand.
turned off until the evening, but then that's the problem. Then it's back to evening and I don't know where the settings
It's
are. Let me
fine.
see.
I easily can edit it out, but that doesn't distract me.
Notifications. Maybe I can do. Oh, okay, good. I'll go up to 10. Okay, good. All right. So I think I've got it now. All right. Sorry about that.
No, that's
So, sensors, right? Like your
yeah.
laptop is a sensor, but like your smartphone, but our houses, like much of this is being run by Google Alphabet, right? So, there was this slow incursion of the Alexas, your Nest thermometers, now the Ring doorbells, right? Looking
Yep.
out. Now they're doing smart appliances. And I would say if people, are interested, for me, like fiction is actually like both movies and short stories are really compelling. And there's one called The Domestic Front in the Oxford American Journal. It's like a journal of the South or whatever, but it's The Domestic Front. And I think it's from maybe 2017. It's a few years old, but it's sort of like this guy who's trapped in a smart house and what it's like. And Cory Doctorow has a novella that has 4 sort of short stories, and one is called Authorized Bread. I think it's Authorized Bread, not about being a refugee and being trapped in a smart, affordable housing unit where you're forced to acquire, like your toaster will only work with authorized bread, but then you have to pay a premium because you're poor, but you can only use the toaster that they give you, but it only takes certain kinds of bread. Like, so everything is more expensive because you're poor, but you're managed in this like smart environment. And then eventually one day the toaster stops working because the company goes bankrupt and they find out, like they try to figure out how to jailbreak all their Internet of Things appliances. But so it's both in where you live, and increasingly they want to shrink people into this tiny amount of, they want to constrain people's mobility.
Right.
And then virtualize them actually like through Zoom, to actually create digital twins. But then the real world becomes full of sensors. So like in Philly, we had these stupid smart trash cans. I don't know if you have those. It was like the Big Belly trash cans, which were gross and dirty, but those were our first smart things, were the Big Belly trash can.
Interesting. I'm not sure if we do. We may downtown.
There's a lot of smart street lamps. Like they're replacing the LED street lamps now. There's smart boxes. Like they want to have this infrastructure that they hang smart things on. So because 5G doesn't go very far, like it doesn't project, they have to have cellular installations like every 1,000 feet. So they're really messy. You have both the big towers and you have these small cells. We have one on either end of my block, and I'm near the Ben Franklin Parkway, and there's just like every cylinders of all sizes. Like, I mean, I need a guidebook to actually even know what all of this stuff is, but I feel like we're all being irradiated. Like I have friends who live under the L, like every 50 feet, there are these sensor displays. And so I think it's because we're the home of Comcast. We're sort of,
yeah, you definitely sound way more advanced than we are right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have that, what is it called? Machine Q. So Chicago, Philly, and the Bay Area were the test beds for Machine Q. And Chicago has this thing called Array of Things. So, they're building it, but they're also already lobbying for something like after 5G, 6G technology.
Heard of that already? Yeah.
Yeah. And so the 6G is for robot-to-robot communication, for the full-on automation and digital twinning. And so there's this crazy paper, I don't know if you've heard me talk about this moonshot paper from the Japan Science and Technology Agency, but they're saying by 2050, we won't have minds and bodies in time and space. Like we'll just be like particles. Yeah. And that's where this Internet of Bio-Nano things comes in. And so it's almost like they want to erase us off the planet. They want to squeeze us into smaller and smaller spaces. As they're sort of jettisoning us, they're making us code the mechanism of our demise or our erasure in some ways. So for example, like after all the lockdowns, many people have been pushed out of their regular work jobs, or jobs they like, jobs in favor of, now they're going to have to do other jobs to build this thing. Right. So in New Jersey, the state of New Jersey is directing people into coding boot camps, big pharma, and energy. Right. So you can code the prison, you can do transhumanism, or you can power it. But like, those are going to be your options. And I have a woman, I was giving a talk in Seattle a couple years ago, and she was doing job training for people who had disabilities, and they had taken almost all the jobs off. Like they were not able to offer those people any jobs other than tech.
Wow.
Like everybody had to do tech, like everything, even if you were the most talented teacher, had other skills, nope, you were all just doing technology. And we didn't, that this is way pre-COVID. So I didn't, like now it makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the Internet of Bodies, but part of it too is they're building these digital twins. Some of it is happening through like the health sector. They're saying we're going to invest a lot of money in biosensor technology, and now it's under the framing of pandemic prevention.
Of course, yeah.
And so if you have these biosensors, we will know the functions of your body from the inside out.
Right.
But to me, it's almost like that's creating this digital twin of you on a
absolutely
biological armature.
And they found the perfect thing to create fear, which drives people to get this thing when and if it becomes available that they wouldn't normally even consider or fathom. I know so many people who, if they truly understood this, would be like, absolutely not. But in the framework of, they're saying that, once this ends, we've got to be ready for the next one. I already know that these are people who are primed to accept any kind of measure. And not only that, but police other people to accept it too, which is, it's like they've created a scenario, a two-tier society where the half that, or more than half in some cases, like Shai was kind of describing, is like chastises you for not participating,
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, let me just, I'm on one of the, it's 10 a.m. I think it's, I'm sorry. I thought I had these notices off of. So yeah, no, it is a caste system. The hard thing is it's the self-policing, it's the panopticon policing, and then it's the fragmentation of society, and then it's using propaganda to frame people. If you have a difference of opinion about what is happening,
right,
that you must fall into a certain category of people that are shameful.
Right.
And the reality is that it's a different split. It's not a partisan split at this moment. It's, and it's not really clear why some people can see it and some people can't. Like, I have to say, like, my family is not on the same page as me, even though like they could easily avail themselves of all of this information that I have. Yeah. And I would love to be wrong about it, but I don't see a different analysis of what I'm putting out. I hope they can't accomplish it, but it's not looking great.
Right.
So this, I was just in an exchange with, like, I participated in one of the freedom gatherings in New York City last weekend. And it was beautiful because I come at things from more like a left-leaning perspective, although, like, I don't know where the hell the left is at this point. Like, I'm like, I understand the empire and military technology. Like, where are y'all? Yeah. But I'm still going to stick with it. And we were being painted like there were provocateurs, like not many, but like there was a news crew that came, an alt news crew, to just film the provocateurs and said, oh, look, this was this event. And I'm like, well, that's not the event as I experienced it. I experienced it with reggae music and diverse speakers and a lot of love and joy and like maybe one crazy person with a flag off to the side. That wasn't the event as I felt very affirmative that it was in alignment with my values. But this was someone who was an educator. And I said, so like, if you weren't there, then what you need to do is weigh these two contradictory sets of evidence of this thing and then make your own understanding. But know that the elite of Davos who are planning this fourth industrial revolution are best served by us fighting each other.
I was just going to say, do you think that all of, and I don't want to make a huge generalization here, but we know the healthcare crisis is a big distraction, and they're using it to usher in all of this social impact investing and all of that, a new transaction system, but also the multiple concurrent crises, and is socially exploding on social media and amplified by the news media on either side, no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, to create.
This is fully bipartisan. Like,
it seems to me that they're creating a massive distraction while they do this. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, it's shock doctrine. I mean, it is I mean, and that's the thing, like with the Trump presidency, is he was a very good actor. I mean, Ivanka was at Davos. I mean, is that to drive people into their respective corners and to double down on their sort of like, different people feeling that they're right. And what I said to this person today is like, I'm not your enemy. Like, I mean, you can like easily look, I have a very public presence and see where my positioning is. And, I don't think that we're out of alignment, and there's stuff that we should learn from each other at this point. Like if you're involved in social justice work, if you're involved in understanding how to protect kids, we should be able to collaborate and learn. And I think that's the thing that's so hard, is that people are frozen by the identity politics and different settings, that they're not able to get out of, like, unlock themselves out of this box. Like the people who are looking at the Great Reset for the most part are. And I never reframe my understanding of this as an extension of slavery and indigenous like genocide, because I'm like, I'm not the patriot person. If you're saying like, I'm from Philly, like the Constitution it was based on a certain economic paradigm that valued certain people over others for economic reasons and racial reasons too. But like also that was the political economy of the slave. Now we are all going to be slaves. Like now this is the new economic model. So we both have to reckon with that. And not to say reckon with it meaning we should just be frozen and not do anything about it and just feel like bad and just wait for someone to tell us what to do. But we have to own that history and then unite to stop this thing. Like that is the most powerful thing. I mean, that's what, like all of the civil rights leaders who were assassinated, like ultimately they were trying to bring people together across race and class.
Absolutely.
And that's where I mean, not that I'm looking to be that, but like, I mean, that is the power, is to say like, listen, at this point, synthetic biology, nanorobotics, and predatory philanthropy and hedge funds, militarized hedge funds layered on top of that are the biggest threat, not only to human life, but to all life, because they're coming after everything. So if we can't unify on that, like
we're done.
And we could. Like that's the thing. It's like this amazing opportunity.
I mean, here's where you really moved me, and made me think to myself, like, when you look at it through this lens, we are all, and rip it down to the studs, we all share so much in common, no matter what other politics people may have, right? You said, I think, and I'm paraphrasing, you said, it's my job as a mom and as a whatever to stand between the children, those who are vulnerable, and the nanotech dictatorship, or however you phrased it. Essentially, like, to be an advocate, to stand between that world of slavery, enhanced slavery, and the vulnerable, and hopefully side with other people to get that message out there, that what this is taking old systems of slavery and exploitation to like its ultimate extension, to do it like Shai said, the Israeli government taught us very effectively to do A, B, and C to other countries. And now we're doing it to ourselves, or they're doing it to us. I said, I remember having a discussion, I think with my father many years ago after 9/11. And I was like, no matter where we stand on this, like my biggest concern is that whatever a government is willing to do to it, other people, it's going to at some point be perfectly willing to do to you. I hadn't even begun to look at it from 30,000 feet yet, from like the big picture, from the global picture. My eyes would slowly be open to that and the full scope of it. And I think with the Great Reset, that really, in the fourth industrial revolution, and again, how you articulate that, really brought it home for me. It's like that should be the thing that we need to be united on. It seems really basic, because if we can't, I personally think we can do it. I think we can do it. I don't know what it will take. I don't know that magic thing to kind of break through to people, but I think we can do it. I see a dark moment with a tremendous opportunity if we can snatch it, I mean, I don't begin to know where to start on that. Creatively speaking, interestingly, I'm writing my own short story series and about about this whole situation, and watching your videos also helped me. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this informs so much of that. But that's a story, that's an issue for another time. It helped my
I
creative
think it's
process
also
too.
music. I think Austin, what if Austin redeemed its
That would be
blockchain history
fantastic.
with music?
That would be fantastic, and got rid of all this tech stuff.
See,
But
that's so
go ahead.
I think it's the, yeah, no, I mean, to me, the other piece of this is it's like this, I've learned a lot this past year, like my learning curve. And on the one hand, it's kind of amazing to like be at my age and still learning all these new things. Like I thought I knew a lot of stuff. And then this year has been like nanotech and neurotech and, you know, all sorts of other elements that I've grown into. And the people who, yeah, who were with me were like energy healers, like people who are doing holistic medicine and like energy work, which I didn't know anything about, and people who are in music and art and faith, like different kinds of faith, you know, including, you know, I have friends in India, and, you know, early on they were like, you know, how you manifest, like where you put your energy, where you put your intention, like, because sometimes I tend to get caught up in the, oh my gosh, look at this horrible thing and this one and this one. And they're like, no, like I mean, not that we shouldn't look at that. And that's part of what, but we also need to manifest like the affirmation of what we can be. And I don't know. So it's this energetic system, and like Steiner, the Rudolf Steiner people, the anthroposophist people, like these are people who are reaching out to me, the Waldorf teachers. And so there's something, you know, Alana Freeland talks a lot about this. Like there's an energetic system. And for me, it just really hit home that Michael Bloomberg, who I feel very strongly is going to run the global, you know, at least this North American division of the global prison planet, because he's in Austin, like he's putting unhoused people in Austin on blockchain with the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation, my pass, you guys are right in it. That he was an electrical engineer.
Yeah.
Like he knew and that's what they want. The nanorobotics is like fundamentally electrical engineering people, but like that, and then data analytics for financial markets, and then, you know, the mayor of one of the most powerful cities in the world, and running those financial markets, and then became the public health mayor and the climate change mayor, and then like has now like moved into this impact investor, like philanthropy phase, which is also taking over many arts, like they're also taking over the arts programs and government. So I think the answer is something vibrational, like in whether that manifests through art or music or faith or something, but that's kind of the next thing, you know, I'm talking with someone about like how to do that.
And how to get people, and you touched on this in one of your videos too, as far as, you know, I think you said, you know, I'm not a religious person necessarily, but the spiritual connection that people were feeling in worship houses, and then they closed those, it dawned on you that part of this agenda is isolation. So, you know what I mean? Like isolating people. We're meant to interact. We're meant to feel each other's energy, and to essentially this transition requires us to fundamentally change our thinking of what it means to be human. Humanness. And we need to preserve that. Our young growing up now, some of them have their foot or will have had, you know, one foot in one world and one foot in the other if we keep going in this direction. But if, you know, you're like 4 years old now and we don't do anything to intercede, they'll know nothing different. You know, that's my fear.
They're really after the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. They're full on.
Well, and the thing is, these impact markets that I talked about, you know, a year ago, January, my friend Julianne, who's in Tulsa, asked me to come back down because Tulsa is a hotbed of a lot of this too. And there it's the George Kaiser Family Foundation and the Schusterman Foundation. And they kind of run Tulsa as their like little test bed community. And so in the Head Start programs in North Tulsa, so this is the location of the race massacre, 100 years, you know, the 100 years after this.
Wow.
That Black Head Start kids in North Tulsa were being put on surveillance play tables, these Hatch Education We Play Smart tables, which are like like flat screen TVs with fisheye lens cameras that record audio and video and score the kids' social behaviors. And that data is used for these impact markets, which were this the Heckman equation, because what they talked about is measurable behavior change, right? And so they're doing pre-K impact investing in measurable behavior change. But to get the data analytics they need to show the impact, they're gonna score these kids playing together. So it's not just that they're at the table by themselves. They're supposed to play with other kids under surveillance. Now, the director of the Kaiser Family Foundation, literally his name is Ken Levitt, and he used to be an advisor to George Tenet of the CIA.
The connection.
Like, can you make?
Yeah, and when you showed that map,
like, no, I mean, I'm just like, but you can't even make this up. I'm like, what movie did I walk into?
Exactly. Yeah, that map that you guys put up on the screen, you showed it a few times, but when you did your interview with Shai, you know, making all the different connections, you know, and then of course, you know, a Trump Foundation was in there somewhere, and Shai was saying, you know, I'm sorry to people who are feeling like
but
Trump.
That's not the Donald Trump. That's a different Trump. But,
okay. Well, but there's so many different players. So actually, since I don't have that map in front of me, in the United States, I mean, who are you mentioned Mike Bloomberg, we know Bill Gates. Who else are the main players? Because we're not one of the top 10 digital nations, but it sounds like what you're describing is we've got these pockets where they're beta testing, they're prototyping, right?
Yeah.
Who are the main players, and what are the main areas where that's happening that you're aware of based on your research?
Okay, so social impact, these outcomes-based government contracts. Okay, so where is this in the United States? Okay, so Arthur Rolnick and the Minneapolis Fed in the 90s. Then in the mid 2000s, these social impact bonds were developed by Sir Ronald Cohen in the United Kingdom. And they were like, prison was the cost offset there. And he was a Harvard MBA. So he developed them, then Michael Bloomberg brought them to New York, and Rikers Island was the first social impact bond in the US. And then there was one with Goldman Sachs for pre-K in Salt Lake City. So there've been about, I don't know, like not that many social impact bonds. They couldn't get them to scale. So if you imagine what they needed to happen for the mortgage, like these asset-backed securities, they need like hundreds of thousands of them to run a hedge fund market. Yeah. Like you cannot run securitization if you only have 12 deals. That totally doesn't, that's not going to work.
Right.
So they need something much bigger than that. So anyway, so they've moved on to pay for success. That was coming through something called, Ronald Cohen in the UK had social finance, and then social finance had divisions in the US, social finance US, and also in Israel, and I think some other places. Third Sector Capital Partners is a major player in developing these pay for success pilot projects. And the seed money for that was coming through the Social Innovation Fund, which was set up under the Obama administration. And the Social Innovation Fund was part of the Corporation for National and Community Service, which houses AmeriCorps and Senior Corps.
Yes, I've heard.
So there's like this also connection to like volunteerism and like unfree labor, like underpaid labor in all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, it's kind of freezing up. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you perfectly.
I think even
when you
okay, all right, it's frozen. You're frozen on my end.
Oh, okay. Well, even when you freeze a little bit, I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, you're totally frozen on my end. I wasn't sure if it was dead or not. Okay, so social finance, Third Sector Capital Partners. Third Sector Capital Partners is led by a man named George Overholtzer. And this is kind of important because he was in on the ground floor of Capital One credit cards. So what Capital One was known for, like in the mid 90s, was it was like one of the first credit card companies that didn't really have a bank attached to it. And even pre-cloud computing, like the onset of that, they were very good at doing data analytics on their customer base and sort of maximizing the debt people could carry and still pay it and be happy. So they were really good at like doing this, the packaging of the debt.
Yeah.
And so Overholzer went from Capital One credit cards to the nonprofit finance fund. And so then they remade the whole nonprofit sector to be data driven. And that was with a lot of money from the William and Florette Hewlett Foundation, Hewlett Packard. And then they went on to third sector capital partners. So at this point, there's like, several dozens of different pilot projects. They're usually around, like Santa Clara County was a test bed, and they had 4. So they had a pre-K one, an early literacy one, a mental health, and a housing. But the mental health and the housing impact bonds, they have a third party to review the deal to make them look legit. And in that case, the third party reviewer is Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's company, which is like, Homeland Security, like predictive policing software, like, the all-seeing eye. Like, it's a real problem to imagine that now if you're, housing insecure or mentally ill, that Palantir is somehow reviewing all of your data for these impact deals.
That it's even connected, yeah.
So it's tied to housing. There are a lot that are running through the Department of Justice for returning citizens. So that's a huge sector. So it's kind of, at this point, it's a lot of pre-K, workforce development, housing for
social
either
services,
people who have,
like,
mental health. It's a full-on weaponization of the social services.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the other piece is addiction. So Philly, it wasn't in Philly, but the Connecticut had one around opioid use. So
my home state of Connecticut.
Yeah, they're yeah. And that's where the hedge funds are. That's Ray Dalio, Bridgewater, and Paul Tudor Jones.
So do you see a situation unfolding in here in the coming months, similar to what is unfolding in Israel or the Estonia model you talked about? And those are small, as you called them, incubator countries, right? Where I'm guessing they're going to iron out all the kinks.
Yeah.
Do you see them? Because I feel like this standardization of everything that they're trying to create, and how it seems to me, trying their best to blow out the debt and have an excuse for a new system. I read an article in Market Watch that was actually originally from the Wall Street Journal about Jerome Powell talking about Congress and the need for them to discuss a digital dollar, digitalizing the dollar.
Yeah.
So I went on a little rant there, but, do you see us? I feel like it's going to unfold pretty quick. And again, not to be all dark and pessimistic, I'm hoping that will be the impetus to wake people up, actually. But, it's moving very quickly in Israel. I don't know much about Estonia. I intend to look into it. It's moving very quickly in Canada. It looks like it's moving very quickly in Australia, based on what I knew even before, hearing some of your research. Do you see them having the ability to move between now and the end of the year as quickly with these programs in the same manner here in the United States? Or is it just too big and diverse?
I mean, it's hard for me to speculate how, I was worried last year that things would be even farther along than they are. So it's, I don't know. The whole thing is kind of surprising to the extent that people, they don't seem to have the capacity to understand the transformation that's happening.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
Well, I finally gotten
and I know my work is frustrating for people because I feel like I need a brain meld with people to be like, let me tell you about the blockchain. Let me tell you about the hedge funds. Let me tell you about the bio nanotech. And they have to have a vague understanding of all those things. Like, let me tell you about empire and that we're actually in the empire and that even though we thought we were, the good people, now all of that power is turned on us, which is hard. Most people don't want to look at that. Most people don't want to own up to that part of the history. And
well, there's that, and even
Yeah, and people don't want to believe it could be this coordinated. That's the other piece too. They're like, it could never happen this way.
Right.
And for me, I talk about that some, is that maybe it's a predator energy. Like maybe AI is already in charge. Like maybe there
Who
is
knows?
something that is suprahuman that is in this thing. I don't know.
Right. If not,
But
if
when
not
I
now,
was
that's where
doing
it's
my
going.
early, oh,
No, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. The connection is really bad, so I'm just not hearing you very well.
Oh, well, I feel bad. I mean, on my end, I can hear you. I can hear you perfectly. Go ahead with what you were saying.
Okay. Oh, I was just going to say about Estonia and Israel. So when I was doing my early work, there was something called I was making these maps, and now I was doing a lot of work on Little Sis, and they've actually just killed all of my maps. They've locked them all down. So like 300 or 400 maps I've made over 4 years. They've just decided, because it turns out the guy who's the admin does GIS for the Columbia University School of Public Health, which is all about impact investing. So as soon as you get close to touching on any of this stuff, it's like, no, you're only allowed to research Trump,
Right.
And the Koch brothers. And I'm like, but no, this is actually the thing. It's the biosecurity state,
Right.
and you're it.
Yeah.
You liberal, you're running the biosecurity state.
Because you're following the money.
So they have the keys to the car.
You're following
exactly, but you're not. I mean, they don't want you to follow that money.
Yeah.
Like it's misdirection, and then, and they used to set up like cute little teams that they would direct on projects in different cities. Mm-hmm. And I never understood why nobody was interested in any of my projects. And it's just because I was actually doing what I was supposed to be doing and not waiting to have them tell me what to do, which was the wrong, like total misdirection, because it's funded by the Ford Foundation and Soros.
Right.
But anyway, so one of my early maps that I made, are a series of maps. It was something called the Research Network on Opening Governance. And it was out of the New York University Government Lab. And they had a setup. I'm trying to remember the guy at Harvard. Neil Kleinman is the NYU guy, and he's like the liberal. And then there was a conservative guy at Harvard, Kennedy School, and they were creating a new operating system for government. That was their book, a new OS for government. And essentially it is behavioral engineering, it's behavioral economics, it's these digital nudges. So that's this video game world that we're in, is that we're going to be given, our task assignments and then put through our pieces. And I didn't understand it fully at the time. It was some Google money. It was a lot of MacArthur Foundation money. MacArthur Foundation money is insurance. So it's, again, risk scoring, actuarial backing. And they were essentially reframing your relationship to the government as sort of this digital citizen status. Right. And so much of this is very carefully crafted, like semiotics, word spells, however you want to structure it, as accountability, right? Transparency. Yes. Mm-hmm. They're using our distrust or our understanding of the system being broken and then weaponizing it again. And like blockchain, that often comes up again. Like, well, don't we want a transparent budget? We'll just put it on blockchain and it'll be so much better, Yeah. But we're not in power. We're not in control of these systems, right? And so this is maybe 4 years ago, but they had, I think, maybe 8 or 10 different gatherings. Most of them were in the US, but then they had one in Toronto. They would have one in London. They would have one in Italy. And so it was a global setup, essentially reframing your relationship to the state as a transaction, right? And that it was prepping this whole weaponization of the social safety net. So under the guise of, efficiency, transparency, accountability, you were being repackaged as a debt commodity on society, not knowing that that's where it was going, to be managed as an offset, because the whole pay for success premise is that you are a burden on society. Before you're even born, we have a pretty good idea about how much you're going to cost the society, and then maybe what your economic productivity is.
How many taxes
so that's
you're
the social engineering piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, but what is your burden? Like, are you going to be sick? Are you going to be unemployed? Like, are you going to need housing? Like, what is your cost to us? And that is where this is all coming from. And that's what the digital nations are. So, it's a colonial project largely. I mean, we're not one of the 10, but it's Canada, it's Australia, it's Israel, it's the UK, Portugal and Uruguay and South Korea and a couple other, I can't remember all 10, but Estonia is the model, and it's small. And actually, Tim Draper of Draper Kaplan Richards was involved on the ground floor of essentially setting up, like, your entire relationship to the state is digital. And now you can even be an e-resident of Estonia, not even physically live there. And what Tim Draper was saying is like, I don't even think we really need national borders anymore. Like we don't really need, and I'm not a nationalist either. Like I'm not framing this from a position of like, I'm the patriot nationalist, because what's coming is this crazy telepresence robotic labor, which the whole idea of borders for digital twins is going to kind of go out the window. But I do believe that people should have responsive government to where they physically are located. Like, I mean, we should have some say in how like our lives are, you know, what our representation process is in our governments.
Oh, absolutely.
And so just this idea that we will be virtualized as characters and just managed by algorithms, and, you know, that Oracle or Cisco or IBM or someone is just going to like front for electoral politics, even as messed up as electoral politics is, like, that's still not going to be a good option. I don't want to live in a, you know, a global techno-fascist state.
Right, which is exactly where we're headed. And interestingly, you talk about the tokens, and this friend of ours, I mean, he means so well, but he's a freedom-oriented individual, and a very open-minded, and he's extremely bright. And so I'm not trying to say anything disparaging about him, but he's been a champion of this blockchain and Wise token. And like you said, like, I mean, they frame it as it's decentralized, no one's in charge, you know, nobody can have their thumb on you, but we're not in charge. It is in fact being, you know, run by people who are unelected. We don't even know who they really are, it seems to me. Like, we know who some of them are. I mean, you know some big names and some big players and stuff, but as far as like who manages these things, I mean, it seems to me, do you know who Catherine Austin Fitts is, the economist? Yeah, one of the things she says is the biggest mystery to her is, you know, the true nature of who and what really runs the show, you know.
Yeah, I think
so you know, the Wise token,
the impact management project.
Yeah, there you go. The Wise token. When I hear that now, and I realize that is them prototyping. Who knows if it'll end up being Wise token or whatever other token, but it seems to me that they're experimenting with different types to see what will ultimately work and what will ultimately get people on board. But my question, or a question that's coming to me now, is the dispossession. So we're all going to be dispossessed, but some are going to be more dispossessed than others in a way. What about, I mean, and what about people like Shai, you know, like who he refuses to get the shot in Israel, you know, say that right now it looks like they are going to pass legislation, if they haven't already done it. They had legislation in the works. I'm not sure if it's passed. But if they do, what are they going to do with the 2 million people who I hope stand strong and say no? You know, like those people, the health minister has literally said, literally, and I'm almost verbatim here, I'm that confident of it, I'm pretty close, the unvaccinated will be left behind. I'm pretty sure that was a piece of the quote out of a Reuters article on the green badge system in Israel. What do you think happens to those individuals? You know, what's the plan for them? Do you think that they're just counting on us all eventually being on the system or disposable somehow? Or I mean, I'm trying to envision, because I know it seems like most people are going along with this, but I trust what Shai said when he said, you know, I don't know for sure, but my gut tells me, based on conversations I'm having, that a lot of people are waking up. I think a lot of people are waking up, Allison, which is great. But
yeah,
if the system moves into place as quickly as we think it might, we have an interesting situation, don't we? We have an opportunity that's really good, but also the two-tier society. You know, what do you think that could end up looking like. I mean, I guess it's easier for me to ask you what it could look like in Israel because it's already underway. So what do you think might happen there?
I mean, we've lived through I mean, not we, but I mean,
Um,
the precedent of Jim Crow. I mean, that was that certain people have certain rights and more conscribed rights. And I mean, we kind of know how that went.
right.
The parameters may be different now, but like, that's why I think the history is important to know, and that it's, it's a moment of reckoning. I think that's why it's, for me, is to say, like having a principled stance and understanding the historic context for it. Right. I mean, that this, when I talk to people, a lot of, often people are like, well, why do you keep talking about the poor? What about me? Cause I'm middle class. I'm like, this thing, unless you have maybe tens of millions of dollars over or whatever, like, it's coming for you. Like, if you have like $1 million, or you're going to be in with everybody else, like the reach of this. So you have to be very clear, I think, about your principled stance. I mean, to me, it feels like, and to step out for the right reason. Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to frame this as like preserving the natural world.
Right.
Like, where literally it's not. And, I know there are a lot of people who are pursuing, creating independent avenues. And while I've said, I certainly respect the idea of, mutual aid and, permaculture and restoring people's, knowledges on the land and different things. Like, I'm in a city of deep poverty. Like, what does that mean to walk away from all of those people? Right. Like, I have friends who, on long-term disability, like, who can't, do you just walk away from the disposable people? Like, are you just like, so I think it's not one either or. I think it can be both and so, I'm not, if I were being part of an intentional community, I don't think I would run it on blockchain. There's a whole contingent of people who feel like that's the way that they want to go. Okay, I still have concerns about the sustainable nature of that, but the reality is if you understand the weapons at the disposal of empire, and at this point it's global empire, really.
Absolutely.
If you are successful and you create a model that is attractive and powerful, then that becomes a threat, right? So if you don't also have people who are challenging it from a spiritual standpoint at the same time, like, you don't want to let this thing lock in uncontested.
Right.
And to me, that's why I feel like it's not, whatever this is, I think it's not the tipping, the point of engagement is something beyond what we can see in the material realm. Like, if you sat down today and said, we are up against DARPA and Goldman Sachs and, all kind of crazy mind control weapons we don't even know about, and nano, it would feel really overwhelming, right? And I mean, it is overwhelming. Like,
of course,
before I was like, it is overwhelming. But those of us who are willing to face that down, like, I don't want to live under those circumstances. So to stand up against that from a grounded place of a moral reckoning, I guess that's it. It's the moral reckoning part.
Yeah. To use your own phrase from one of your videos, and I think you used it more than once, and I used it in an email to my sister today because I've been trying to reach out to her, and my family's really more on board now, but I'm really trying to reach them. We need to revoke consent and say, you may have decided that this is what you have in store for the next step for us, but we didn't say it's okay. We didn't agree to be collateralized and made into just cattle, essentially. Like, we already are, but we didn't agree for you to be taking it to this next level. We want something different, and then we need to pursue the world that we've been in, that's long overdue. And that's a whole different conversation, right? First we have to like figure out how to wake people up to this thing. But
see, I think that making the world you want is part of that converse, like, is part of the thing. Like, okay. I don't know. Like, I've been told a number of times, like, doing local organizing, and Philly has a pretty robust sort of like fractious, like left socialist, anarchist, like democratic socialist, like scene. Like there is all of this stuff. And I was active in around the Occupy ICE movement, because Pennsylvania has one of 4 family detention centers, which our Democratic governor still has kept open for years and years and years. So it was never just a Trump problem or a Republican problem.
Exactly. They keep us
under,
yeah.
So I was in the space and organizing, but sort of told, like, if you are not, a person of color, you should just stand down and not really just wait to follow our lead. And my problem is, in my city, many of the forces that are at work are actually like Black professionals, Black politicians, and part of the Democratic Party.
Right.
And so, I'm not going to, everybody has their own path, but I'm like, I'm not going to fall into line behind something that I know is going to be, I have too much knowledge to sit back and pretend I don't know.
Right.
So I'm just going to, if I'm not going to presume to tell certain communities what they should do, but I will go to Salt Lake City and tell members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints it's not a moral thing to put kids on blockchain, because right. You know what? They don't want to do it either. You know what I mean? But they don't even know that it's a thing. Right. I will go to different places and tell communities that I can tell. Like, I can go to the Unitarian Church and, liberal Mount Airy and say, listen, if you're going to do your ESG portfolio and you're going to hang your Black Lives Matter banner outside and your rainbow banners, make sure there's not kids on surveillance play tables part of that deal. Like, right. Do your due diligence and don't just like hand it over. And that's part of sort of my concern around, Catherine Austin Fitts. Like, she has a whole report that's on ESG investing, which she kind of hedges, but like, if she wrote a whole report, then she probably knows about the impact management project, mm-hmm. So, at some point the fence sitting you're not going to be able to fence it anymore. You're going to have to pick the side. I mean, that's the same with Children's Health Defense. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's a major managing partner in Vantage Capital Partners, which is one of the largest green venture capital firms. At some point, he's going to have to reckon with health is sustainable development goal number 3. And so being invested in IT and, health diagnostics is going to intersect with people's health freedom choices. And right. That's just how it is. People are going to have to get right with themselves. Right. Nobody can do that work for them.
It's so interesting. I mean, you just named 2 people who I would say I look to for, my buddy Lionel looks to Robert Kennedy Jr. or whatever, for as a strong voice on vaccinations and children's health. I would say I look to Catherine Austin Fitts as someone, I would say what little I know about her, at least as someone who challenges the system and is trying to make people aware of the transaction system. But what I hear you saying is that they all still in ways are attached to it via the sustainable development goals. And they're participating in the process, basically. Is that what you're saying? Like, they're still somehow participating in the
I'm saying, like, I'm one of the few people that's surfacing at this point the impact space and the internet right. of bodies. Like, there's sort of vague allusions to digital slavery or digital currencies.
Well, that's why I wanted to talk.
You can't hit, like, you can't really be in this space and not see pay for success, social impact, impact metrics, value-based, if you're in the Medicare for all space and you're not talking about electronic health records and value-based payments and how this connects to like health vouchers and surveillance tracking and of, people's health choices, like, I'm a mom. I mean, granted, I have been put in places to see this, but I can't be the only one. Like, I was just talking with someone else who's a very prominent person in the space who's like allied more on the blockchain thing. And I said, you guys have to figure out, like, dealing, like, if being part of the crypto world means you're not going to talk about impact investing in the internet of bodies and the spatial web, that becomes a problem, because that's the thing. Right. So you need to reconcile, like, if you're the white hat crypto, person, where are you on the spatial web? Because Deloitte is talking about it. The accounting firms and the law firms are writing up the freaking smart contracts at this point. Yeah. So you can't pretend it's not happening.
Right.
So, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like, I mean, I'm able to do this work because, I have a partner who has benefit. Like, I'm not saying I'm better than other people, but I'm saying we need to actually start pulling the whole thing apart
Oh,
and acknowledging the whole essence.
Yeah, because if we don't do that,
I mean, I'm not going to judge other people. I don't call people like controlled opposition. I don't, but there is some real material difference if you're not talking about a year in. You know, I wrote early last April, saying this is going to usher in biometric digital identity. I was like early April because I knew what was happening in Austin. Like, I'm like, QDX health passport in Austin's already, it's coming.
yes,
a year later.
you talk about,
like,
I think you
there's a
talked
little
about that
bit,
in your videos too. And I was thinking to myself,
but it was like
here I sit in
April,
yeah.
last April.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of tired.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. So we're
people who have, you know, many more staff members, many more resources than me, who aren't there yet.
But you are
reaching, maybe they'll get there.
You are reaching people. And one thing that you said that I definitely took to heart, because it's something that I need to work on, is you said, and spiritually, I really need to work on this. Like, I wouldn't have found myself talking like this 2 years ago, but you said we need to find room in our hearts, you know, to when the people who are participating see the big picture and decide to join.
Yeah.
We need to have room in our hearts to say it's okay that you were there, now you're here, and not be angry with them, or have I hope I'm capturing your sense.
We need more doors in, back in.
Right.
I mean, we're all human. That's the thing. Like, you know, I've been hurt by, you know, engagements, people, connections, like, but that's part of being human, is being vulnerable and making mistakes and having people make mistakes with you and then try to figure it out. Like, if we're fighting the robots, like if we just wanted a seamless thing where it was all easily predictable, then we'd have robots, right? So
and I think we all come into, those of us who are seeing the picture have come into it surprisingly through different avenues. So I'll just a quick little bit about me here, you know, personally, is I was injured as a child by a vaccination at age 3, the MMR vaccination, severely injured. Not just, I mean, like, I was meeting all my milestones, and then I was basically deemed autistic, and actually told at age 6 or 7, my mom was told essentially, you're going to have to put him in a state institution at some point. Like, that's what you're going to have to do. My mom is a warrior and got services and got all kinds of, I mean, my mom is a force of nature that way, and advocated for me, so that by the time she and my father went to the vaccine court in 1992 to sue, as they should have, as part of a class action lawsuit, I think. But the judgment that they got was no, for 2 reasons. One, I won't name, you know, just for her, because I won't. But the second reason was, well, you know, yes, he was injured, but because of the interventions you took, now he's exceeding milestones, or meeting them and exceeding them. So you know what? You guys don't deserve anything. We had been through, I mean, I have a lump in my throat, so give me a second. The trajectory and what it put my family through is ineffable. Like, I can't even begin to put it into words. And so I took it personally when they weren't even questioning this vaccine. I was like, you know, you guys know, and I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying use your critical thinking skills and look into it, and see how it ties into other things. Who are the mover? Like, look at the web, look at all the moving parts. You know what I'm saying? Like, because we've had discussions around this as in, you know, adults. What happened to me? Was it just, can you just chalk it up to, well, you know, sometimes medicines have side effects? That there's a huge cohort of people that don't just get injured, but die. In poor countries, they die, they get experimented on and they die. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big deal. So I came into researching a lot of this stuff from that door, like through that door, and it took me to all kinds of unforeseen places. All I was looking for was, you know, what's in vaccines. And then it turned into so much more. And like, explaining that to my family at first was beyond their grasp. And then slowly but surely, you know, they became more receptive. despite my best efforts, the only one not to get vaccinated so far is my dad. He won't do it. He knows what the agenda is and he's not going to do it. I think that the rest of my family knows now, but it's too late. So like they're in the stage that, what else can, from, one of my siblings, for example, I think that what she is thinking is, what can I do to protect my family? You know what I'm saying? Like, as you were discussing, like knowing the rules for this game, because if you think, to use your words again, just if I'm getting it right, you think you're playing checkers, you're playing chess, and actually against a grandmaster, no less. So you got to know the rules of the game in order to navigate it. That's one. And then I think in doing that, we actually, in a way, are resisting the implementation of the system. We're slowing it down enough that we can do work to help bring people over. I wish I had more eloquent explanation of what's in my head, but it's been a long day. So that's where I come at it from. You came at it from your direction, I came at it from mine. But I think helping it make it personal to people's lives is of inestimable importance, like applicable to their lives. And right now, obviously, people are running on fear. Like Shai said, fear is so powerful. And I think it was him that said, it's a cycle. So fear feeds the ignorance, and then the ignorance feeds the fear. And it's like this, and they've got us in that. And how do we get people out of that to be like, stop being afraid of that thing? It's like I started a blog post that I'm editing. I haven't finished it, but I likened it. I was thinking about, those magic eye posters from the 90s, where you would stare at something long enough and then be like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden it's not just a bunch of like dots. It's like 26 dolphins jumping in unison through the ocean. You know what I mean? And you're inside of it. Those things were amazing. It was there the whole time. It depended on how you were looking at it and how your brain interpreted the information. The stuff you're talking about isn't conjecture. It's fact. You read grants, and maybe you can talk a little bit about where you get some of this information, and you draw really logical conclusions about what's very likely going on. And the reality is that our conclusions are far more likely based on the evidence than the mainstream. And that's me putting it unbelievably lightly to somebody who would be brand new to this. That's how I would present it to them, just because I don't want to lose them right away. I would just say one outcome is highly probable over the other, and it's not the one you think. It's not the narrative you think, or the mythology that you think, or the culture that you think you're part of, or you know what I'm saying? Like it's something else. So
well, I mean, and I think for me, part of this, because I came into it from such a different angle, like a lot of people were now coming in through, vaccine injury or the truth movement, like 9/11 or different things. And like, I just came in from a totally, and even leaning sort of on the left side of politics. I was like a longtime NPR liberal, like who kind of fell left. And then it was like still figuring it out, like from more a Black radical tradition left than a white Marxist left. And then, so there were lots of, I didn't know, like, oh, you're not supposed to go there. Like I didn't have that many heroes, or like, don't do that because it might, we don't do that, and I would just, and not that I was, I don't know, I talked to a few people, they're like, oh, there are people who've been doing this for 20 years and they're not seeing it the same way. And I'm like, I just have a fresh set of eyes,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so, and it's this synthetic thinking and what I do is, look at people's LinkedIn profiles and look at the web, the conferences that they go to and the white papers that get written. And, a lot of the articles, the pieces are there, they're fragmented. And I think, I have to say one of the things I most miss, and this is why I don't want to leave, like, I was with all these New Yorkers last weekend and they were amazing. And, you know, because they love their city too. Like they don't want to have to go run off to, I mean, not that they don't like the woods, but like they love New York. Like they want their old New York back, right? Like I want my old Philly back. Yeah. And the things that I love, like the restaurants and the theater and the art and the street life, like, but we would have these wonderful, like small scale independent theaters where, you know, maybe like 50 or 60 people in a, and it taught me, like, there were literally, like, looking back, I'm like, there are like 5 plays that I've seen over the past, you know, 5 that really influenced how I think about things. And one of them was called Ideation. And it was at the, actually at the, like the Latvian Institute, you know, it was this small stage, but it was a the set, it was just a conference room. And it was like 4 or 5 characters, and they were like consultants, and they were given this task of disposing of, like, coming with a plan to dispose of a huge number of bodies or something. Like clearly, like from a pandemic, it was like a McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group. And it was this contrast between, like, it wasn't clear if this was real or this was just a scenario they had to plan for. Okay. And they were like, you know, but I got to go to my kid's soccer game. Like it was this like banal stuff and this really heightened thing. And then the more they were in this dynamic, they were like, well, what don't we know about this? Or what else is going on? Are there pieces missing? Or where do we fit in this equation? And so there were these larger existential questions. And like, for me, that feels like we're in this moment where there's this machine that is coming together, and people know their cog, they know their lever, they know their thing, and they're doing the best job they can to make the best cog, you know, over there. They don't realize what the machine's going to do. Right. Like they don't actually, and there's very little social or financial incentive in society to actually do that looking.
Right. There's I'm
not a career person. I work half time, and like the work I do, I love, and it keeps me grounded, but it's not my intellectual pursuit. This is my intellectual pursuit. And so if my identity was tied up in a status thing attached to like money or prestige, I would have no incentive to do this.
Right. Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
But in doing it, I find people, and it's those people and the experiences who are the gifts. Like that's what comes out of it. And so
I felt that way when I watched your videos. I was like, you know, this is amazing. And, you know, you said something, and that's why I was really glad you put your money where your mouth is and you replied to me in your email. Yeah, I think it was in your interview with Shai. You're like, you know, we linked up, and you just never know who you're going to get on the internet, but we took a chance on each other anyway, or maybe that was a different interview. But I love that, because we're at the point where you do need to do that. Yeah, you don't know who you're going to get, but I think a lot of people are feeling this, coming at it from so many different places, but we all share one common thing as far as this is concerned, and that is that, you know, we want to save the natural world and what it is to be human. We don't want to make, I personally, and I think if I could help someone who was a proponent, if they even understood it, of a transition to a silicon existence versus a carbon one, we don't want that. You know, we don't want that. Yes, there's marvels of technology, but that doesn't mean that we need to or should make this transition. And we need to help people see what's really in front of them, like the Magic Eye poster, you know. And it's like, how you do that, I don't know. I think you summed it up at the end of an interview where, you know, where you said people, if they do wake up, sometimes become immobilized by the fear. I think that's what you meant. And I understand that feeling, because it's like, you know, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe I'm immobilized by fear, and all the other days I'm like, yeah, let's figure this out, you know. It's tough when because like all the stuff you said, reading white papers, reading grants, looking at LinkedIn profiles, matches with something that you've said, that I've said, that so many people have said, that it's hidden in plain view. They're telling you. I mean, they're not telling you, but yeah, they kind of are telling you, and counting on, or maybe, I don't know, you know, that people are just going through their daily grind, too busy and tired to do that, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, because the information is not hidden. It's not locked in a vault somewhere.
I don't even have special like library privileges or anything, special journals. It really isn't hidden. But part of it is like knowing a language. And I think that's what, like, when people, like, some people find my stuff and they're like, yes, and they dig in immediately. They're like, and then, but I think a lot of people are like, an equal number of people go, oh, like that's too much. That's too much. And so it's sort of like an immersion language program.
Absolutely.
And like I did a study abroad, but I did the baby version where like we actually all hung out, like 25 college students in the house together, and we'd kind of take trips, but it was the like I didn't go live with a family, right? And so it's kind of like I have compassion for that, but there are some people who can jump in, and then some people who are like, oh, the water's a little cold. And so I think those of us who can jump in, like literally I went to Salt Lake City because similar thing, like a woman emailed me and I knew I was supposed to go to Salt Lake City. Like I knew like for a long time that there was a lot going on there and that I had something I needed to go and see that. But she had only seen one of my video with Sarah G like 4 days ago, and she knew nothing about blockchain, and she like dove into blockchain in 3 days. And then it turns out her neighbor was doing digital identity for Brigham Young and was working with Evernym, which is the digital identity system that's running all of this thing. And he came to my talk. Really? So like, I'm like, and she was like, trained in Waldorf, a Steiner person. So I'm like, no, we're like, sometimes things just happen.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do all the things. Like, you don't have to show up and like, oh my gosh, like, if I don't have 500 people with me, I'm a failure. Like some of it, I think, is reimagining what, especially in the US, like I think people, their ideas of success get wrapped up in like quantity or like different types of things. They imagine success differently. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I think there's something in this non-material realm that it's not that if you can't go out and build a separate village or a whole permaculture farm, or you can't rouse 1,000 people, that you're a failure, because you can do a small thing where you are. Right. And, like I've connected with people who are like of the Christian faith. Like I'm not really excited, like people who are mean, I don't do mean people, but there's a lot of very kind Christians. They're like, can I pray for you? Like once I woke up and I'm like, I need to go to John Coltrane's house today. His house is like falling down and it's like about a 20-minute walk from my house. And I lazed around on the sofa and I was doing research on my pajamas all day. And someone called and they were very interesting. And they said, can I pray for you? And I'm like, sure. Like I could use some help. Like, why not? Okay. And so, and I said, it's getting dark because it was the winter. And so I said, I still need to go to John Coltrane's house, but maybe I was supposed to wait for this phone call. Like maybe at that. And so when I went on the walk out there, and when, it was cold and there was a palm frond, maybe like more of like a palmetto frond on the sidewalk, which is not a common thing in North Philadelphia. And so I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to take this to his house. And like, I'm walking, and then in this like dark kind of, his house is like tucked behind a power transfer station and these railroad tracks. Like it's kind of not easy to get to it. Like, and I cut through on a street thinking I would as the cut through point, but it's too soon. And then there was it was all being gentrified, like this co-working space and like LED blue light, but it was like this old, like it had been redlined, like had been falling down. It's just crazy. And there was a woman who had this paper cut. It was like a brick warehouse wall that had been bricked in. So it was like a tiny alcove, and it was lit from above. So if it had been the day, I would not have even seen it. And it was this indigenous woman coming out of a monarch butterfly, with her lungs were all this cut paper, Sharon Schnitta like stuff, and these hands. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Wow. So I'm like, I was supposed to see you. So I sat on the step underneath this woman and looked up. I'm like, I should look up what palm frond. It's probably a symbol of something. Mm-hmm. And it said a peaceful victory. Wow. Like a triumph, but from a peaceful place. So I was like, wow, okay. So then I go up like another, 10 minutes to his house. Like, and, I make this little love, like with broken glass and sticks, because it's all like a mess, out there. And they had put in new windows in the door. And this is a big Philly row house, but no one will invest in it because he's a revolutionary musician, a faith, like he suffered from addiction, and he came through that, and he had this faith, and he wrote a love supreme. And so on the door, how you put paper in the window so you can't see in. Yeah. And I went up because it had like one of those lights that motion sensor. And I went up, and on the paper, it was like, it said, for a love supreme. And it says, one thought creates millions of vibrations and they all go back to God.
That's beautiful.
So like all these things happen in one day. And I'm like, I mean, I'm not trying to put stuff together, but I'm like, okay, that's how we do it. Like, and that's just one person having one small encounter.
Absolutely. And let me, before, I've been talking for a while, and I want to ask you one question that my buddy wanted me to ask you. But I was in a spot where I mean, give up. I wasn't ready to give up, but I was in a dark spot with all of this and feeling really discouraged. And then what brought me back and like it reinvigorated me, and I thanked Lionel. He sends me tons of videos, and I'm like sometimes just overwhelmed by it, is watching you and the approach that you take to this. Just lifted my spirits and made me rethink all of it and come at it from a different angle. I think too that our success is going to be, like you said about speaking a language, it's like it depends on, going to have to tailor the approach depending on where that person or persons are in their understanding of what's going on. And sometimes the pressure of time feels like, oh, you know, we don't have much time, but we're gonna have to do what we can with that, you know, embrace Eckhart Tolle's power of now concept and just wring the moment out like a wet towel and get as much out of it as we can, and try to take that approach.
I just got this one, The Many Worlds of Hugh Everett III. It's about the many worlds, the physics, quantum physics, and parallel universes.
Very cool.
So like, and when I was doing all of this, I read A Wrinkle in Time, which I don't know if you've ever heard of that one.
That brings me
like
back.
Like I read that when I was in elementary school. It's from the early 70s.
Yeah.
But like at the end, it's IT is the evil presence. And the sister has to try to get her brother out of the trap of the IT. And it's like her love, like it's like but it's quantum physics. It's this physics, interdimensionality, space. And so to me, it feels like we have to sort of, again, I'm not saying be dismissive of time, but I think there are bends and quirks in some of the time that like, we should not get so caught up in that we don't have the time and not be intentional about it. Because I think there may be things going on in time. Again, that was that crazy art installation at the end of Union Square, this metronome with this countdown clock, this insane, crazy dark portal thing that I was like, I'm giving my speech and I'm going, does anyone see the terrible art thing up there, right? This count, but like that time is a slippery thing.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just trying to like, I don't like,
I agree.
There's some physics, some string theory stuff that might be going on.
I think too that, let me look up Lionel's question real quick. I think that that's a tool that's used to, it's another part of the fear. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I think that it is counted upon that we will feel like, well, I'm just one person and it looks like we're towards the end of this thing anyway. What can I do? You know what I mean? Like not enough time. So yes, I definitely shouldn't have that. So what Lionel's asking is where you get your resources and how we can compile them. I guess you can speak more on that, but you already answered that question, I think.
I mean, unfortunately, they just kicked me out. They killed all of my little sys maps and kicked, like, I mean, it's crazy. So like now I'm still scrambling for.
Was that on your website that they, so where?
Well, I mean, it was a crowdsourced relationship mapping software.
Okay.
And yeah, but I was mapping the wrong stuff. The right stuff. But
right. So they got you.
Yeah. But see, part of actually what I'm thinking about, and I would really encourage the one person who's been writing some, there's two pieces on social impact bonds. Winter Oak has a really nice and clever piece of the Winter Oak blog on social, the impactors, I think it's kind of humorous. And then Raul Diego, who writes for Mint Press, he did a series and including a piece called like Bits and Bytes Data Capitalism.
Okay.
And so like, we're also trying to sort of imagine, he's looking at developing a platform called Silicon Icarus, which is also an interesting idea, is this, you know, these technocrats flying too close to the sun, right? With these wax wings, they have this hubris that they're, you know, and so of both sharing like a collaborative space for like independent journalism, like a non-paywalled space to do this, but then also possibly having some sort of platform space to capture some of these revocations or transmutations. And, you know, I'm sort of, it hasn't been manifested yet, but like almost like a digital scrapbook of like inspirational ideas, like a pin board of, if you do a like, what are your gifts? That's, you know, if people are feeling down, I highly encourage Robin Wall Kimmerer's, I always say her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, because it's sort of like a indigenous mother anti-capitalist. She's citizen Potawatomi Nation, but she's a biologist and she studies moss, and she's always about like relations of beings. And like she talks about know your gifts and how to give them, right? And so you're saying like everybody's coming from a different place. So if we're doing these revocations, I know musicians, right? Like you could play a revocation, you could sing, you could do spoken word, you could cook out, you know, this Utah teapot, the virtualization at the Merrill Engineering building in Utah, I told someone, reclaim the virtual teapot, pull it back out and like have a tea party in front of like with your friends. And you know, we could share recipes, we can share, like, not all of it, you know, I'm not trying to create a big data trail for the, you know, the state intelligence systems per se, but like, I mean, we're all kind of in it already. I'm not doing anything. You know, like, so, but different people may feel differently. Like, I'm not trying to be a honeypot for that, but like, people inspire other people. So if we can create some kind of space to say like, you know, here's a range of things that people are doing. Like I've had a bunch of people reach out to me and say like, I'm imagining what this would look like in my community. Right. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about. You know, when they killed my little sis stuff, like I mourned it really hard the first time they did it. And then they brought the mask back up. And then like, cause it was like 4 years worth of work, right? And it was locked down. And then, you know, and the second time it's been less difficult because I got a lot of it on the Wayback Machine and someone actually like it saved a lot of the JPEG. So I'm almost ready to say maybe that level of analysis is that door is closing. Like maybe we've done like the mapping of the minutia. Maybe we need to get into a more spiritual place. Like maybe the next phase is doing this more artistic or spiritual work that doesn't involve LinkedIn, you know, like.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the information that we need to be able to prove it. And now we need to take it to the next level in terms of the humanity and saving that, not just humanity, but like the living life. All of it. And that goes into his next question, where, you know, any organization, groups that we can join, things that you suggest about roundtable solutions, talks, conferences, ask her about all that stuff. You kind of talked about all of that stuff. And I think that as far as everything you just said, you know, I mean, I've been working on a website, which is something completely outside my purview. I've just as we close here, I worked with youth, at-risk youth, for 14 plus years. I got laid off due to the pandemic in October, and so they you know, I wouldn't say they took care of me, but they didn't send me off with nothing. So I was able to take some time and work on my writing and really delve in. And you know, I was like talking with a dear friend of mine, Harris, and I know he wouldn't mind if I used his name, about creating a website where we're envisioning a lot of what you were just talking about. It's just such an alien concept to us. For me, certainly, I'm doing the bulk of the work. Harris has like 4 kids to take care of, but and I don't. So I'm doing, and that's fine. We each do our part in different ways, but I'm trying to figure out how to even build it, like, you know, so that the technical part is hard for me. I'm a writer, so that part is easy, but the other stuff, it's like, you know, it's all new to me, but that gives me a lot of ideas there. And you know, building community, real community. You know, getting people drawn in initially through this hub that's online, but also with the ultimate goal of being like, hey, come to my backyard. Let's have a bonfire tonight and let's all talk you know, or do, or, you know, play music or problem solve. I don't, you know, whatever, you know, drawing people back to being together. Because after a year, I think people have become,
Well,
I'm
we're
an
a little
intro,
rusty.
yeah, I'm an introvert by nature, but I still need people. And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, when you being an introvert and knowing that people are, you know, the world is still there when you need it is one thing, versus being an introvert and it's like everyone's afraid to come out of their house and come near you, you know,
Yeah, I know that's hard.
hiking on a trail, and, you know, I'm passing someone, they're going this way, I'm going that way, and they step all the way to the side because I'm not wearing a mask outside.
Yeah,
You know, no, not everybody does that,
yeah,
but a lot of people do. And it just, I'm like, that's the part we need to really, there's so much we need to fix, but that's the part to me that is, it seems insurmountable, but it's not. And I think we need to like help people remember what it's like to be around people again, before
exactly.
we
Yeah,
can't let too much more time go by with this isolation because people are getting too used to it.
yeah.
There's so much more I would ask you. We talked for a while. I appreciate you. Would you, is there anything else you would say, and you know, hopefully we can talk again, by the way, if you're down for that, but is there anything else you would say about blockchain and the sustainability and the environment that because you were starting on that, and I think because of the connection I may have interrupted you, or
Yeah. No, I just, the cryptography, it is energy intensive. And I mean, there's part of me that was one, you keep hearing about, cold fusion or something. I sort of imagine like, what is going to power if they blockchain the world, right? If they turn, like, where is all of the power to run the cryptography coming from? Like, you know, they've been moving the technology of the data storage into like now the readable and writable DNA, stuff. So they're shifting the nature because this Internet of Things, Internet of Bodies, but like the sheer vast amount of data storage is just going to skyrocket. And so like Microsoft and Gates have been working on these new systems, but to me, it feels like, there's the energy of there's the water to cooling these centers. Like, where is it going to be powered by cold fusion? Is it going to be powered like Sophia Smallstorm? She's really interesting. And she's like, I think it's going to be powered maybe on this human piezoelectric energy harvest, which is like, they're actually using like nanofibers to like capture the micro like power in like when you swallow or you blink or you like smile. And like they're gonna like, I mean, and they've actually set this up already for powering wearable technology. So it's like you would power your own smart shirt or something, but like, could you power more than your smart shirt? Like literally, is this becoming the Matrix or not? That is her concern, is that like, countries in the global South, like their children will be signed up to power the blockchain, like by walking around or something. Or, she was saying like, the continuum of care pathway is that the, alcoholic on the corner is going to be expected to get up and walk around, to earn enough energy to, get some crypto token to, get food, or, like that there's going to be a weird
and really
harvest that's coming on that.
Yeah. Wow.
And so like, I mean, the other piece is that the blockchain like inherently is fueling global transactions, global supply chains. And I hadn't talked about the like globotics, which is this remote haptic robotic labor, which is this next phase of globalization where you're like in your living room operating a factory in, Korea, or you're bidding to do that, right? And then next week you have to bid for some other job, and the borders are different, and your mobility is different, and that all runs on blockchain. Like the AI that's going to give you your gig work is going to be querying your codes to say, do you have this skill code? Some of the early the state of Illinois, which is, again, Chicago. So the futures trading, Pritzker was backing that, Rauner was backing that. They need a digital identity system to hang all of your codes on you, right? So that they can start to figure out what work you qualify for in this globalized telepresence workforce. But like telehealth is early on in that. Like they were looking at credentialing for doctors and like continuing education and framing it as how convenient. But really it's going to be, somebody wakes up in the, early morning with a sore throat, and they get on their phone to ask for a consult, and it'll be like 10 doctors from 10 different countries competing to bid on the consult on the sore throat based on the blockchain credentials. And so to me, like the people who are framing everything as like liberation and agorism and local is like, why does it need to be on a blockchain?
Right.
Like, unless what you're talking about is like you're trading stuff with people halfway around the world, like why does it have to be on block? Like this is for scalable, seamless, and they frame it as trust, but really the nature of needing a blockchain trust means that you don't have trust. It's like the inverse.
Right.
That's the guy who was working with Evernym. He's like, but it's trusted. And I'm like, listen, like he was younger than I was, but I'm like, when you come out of college, like people would interview you. And if you had a basic credential and you seem like a good fit, they would train you to do the work because they had some commitment to keeping you. Right. This disposable just-in-time labor market, like, is that going to serve the next generation well? Is that a kindness to throw them into that world of work? And I think they're trying to frame it as like liberation that you can work all over the world as a robot, but it isn't. It actually isn't. Yes. So like for me, I had the opportunity to spend some time on the Cheyenne River Reservation last summer. And, as part of that, like I saw, there was a giveaway ceremony, right? And so these are people who from a material, a Western material lens have very limited financial assets, but spent hours acknowledging people, thanking people, and giving things away, including people like me that they didn't know, had never met, and gave me sage and fabric and a laundry basket full of soaps, and they didn't know me, right? But it was a gift economy, right? And so it was this idea that you have, you're investing in people, you're investing in relationships, so that when you give with the understanding that someday you will not have, and someone else who does have will give to you, but it's not kept on a blockchain.
Right.
It's a communal relation, which is a different thing. Like you could say it's reciprocal, but it's not mechanized.
Right. That's a good
So, I mean, I guess that's for me, like, and I'm not an economist and I can't say that I can promise to scale it and defend it and, whatever. But to me, that's just spiritually, if we're in this spiritual engagement, do you want to create an agorist world that's based on a machine?
Right.
Because to me, I feel like we're in this moment because they're trying to make us machines. And that as a principled stance, it's to be outside of that.
Right. I will say one more thing too is, in addition to the participation in all of this historically that we have to come to terms with, the other thing, another piece of that is that we've been participating, all of us, unwittingly, in building the AI machine through feeding data.
Yeah.
Like without,
even
especially especially early on in the internet days, like when I was hopping on a computer in 1995 or 1996 or whatever, as a high school freshman, and I didn't know and could have never imagined what the internet would have turned into, or that every bit of data from that point until now is feeding a system that is only becoming more and more intelligent and rich in information and data every single second, every time someone uses a device and that's connected to the web, to the spatial web, or we're building it.
Yeah.
And so we need to come to terms with that too. And I think that's part of the revoking the consent, which maybe we can talk about another time, because I'm thinking about that a lot. So if I have any epiphanies, I'll email you. But I won't keep you any longer, Allison. I know it's later there. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Well, you're more than welcome. I'm glad that it resonates. Sometimes you just put stuff out and you
hugely
goes walking out into the world. Because the thing is, like, this information, I'm not like, I want to be very clear. I have the benefit of time to pull a lot of this together, but the synthesis, like, I have been the recipient of an incredible amount of like teachings from other people. People have been generous with their life experiences with me, and predominantly in a formal education setting. And so I think we just need to do that for each other, and that it's collective knowledge. And so and it's not fixed. It keeps aggregating and refining, and new ideas being added in. So I don't want the perception that somehow I know all the things, because I don't.
Yeah.
I create, like, hopefully I put some parts together, and then we can put it out on the table and say, well, what do you have more parts? And
what you just described is the organic version of us resisting the other thing. Like you know what I'm saying? We're building the knowledge, and you're a part of that. And your piece in my life this week was simple but profound. And that is that at a moment where I was just in a place where that wasn't good, you know, like, you presented information in a way that reminded me I can change the language to reach people. There is reason to be hopeful. There, you know, it was just, and you know what, that your delivery did it for me. And maybe, you know, together we can do that for other people, and we'll create other people who can do that for other people, and we'll just keep going with it. So
it's like the whatever, millions of vibrations, one thought.
That's it. One thought, millions of vibrations. I love the work that you do, the research that you do, and hopefully we stay in touch.
Yeah, I would love that, because like I'm still intrigued by Austin. Like, there is an interesting thing about the technology and the music, I think.
That is an interesting fusion, although I will say any Austinite that's lived here their whole lives, because I've been here for 15 years, they deeply miss the old Austin, trust me.
I know. Well, what was the old Austin like?
From what I understand, it was simply a city that was more like a big town, where you could be a starving artist and live a good life.
Yeah.
You know, you could be an aspiring writer, painter, musician, and eke out an existence in the heart of the city, near all these beautiful natural resources. And it is simply not like that any longer. You know, the city council is so far removed from the people. You know, I talk to friends that lived here all their lives. Doesn't matter where their politics are. Here's what they say. The chief difference is in the disconnect of the people who run the city and the people who live here. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, there was very much a connection there.
Yeah. Well, it's moving towards the e-government.
Yes.
Like the What Works government, the mayor, I know, is part of that Bloomberg connection.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But if you can articulate it, like, to me, I mean, that's the time frame. Like, what's to say it couldn't swing back? You know, like, I don't think that it's only one way. Like, I don't know. I don't think that totally forecloses everything if you can actually articulate it.
Right.
You know?
And that's what we focus our energy on is that swing back. So at any rate, I bid you farewell for the evening.
Lionel, thank you.
I will. And keep doing what you're doing, and I'll be in touch.
Okay. All right. Good night.
Good night, Allison.